Did you ever ask yourself, why do we need an appraisal report when we purchase a property? I mean, why can't we just look up the value on Zillow and then we know that the property is worth X, Y, and Z instead of having to spend an extra $500 or $600 to get an appraisal report for the lender, right? Makes a lot of sense. My name is Zevi. I'm the owner of a mortgage business called Brook Inc. in Woodland Hills, California. That's what I do. And I want to talk to you today about getting an appraisal done for your purchase and why do you need to do it and when do you do it. So if you're interested in learning about that, you're watching the right video, all right? So let's get started with that. Why do we need an appraisal report? Well, check this out. If you were going to give money, you personally, for something that I was going to buy, and I was going to come to you and say, hey, listen, I'm going to buy this property for, let's just say, $500,000, and I'm going to put down 30%. That's $150,000. I need a loan from you for $350,000. Now, I know you don't know a lot about lending, or maybe you do, but you start thinking about how you could protect yourself from knowing that whatever loan you're about to give this individual is going to come back to you, or at least the property that you're lending against is worth whatever it is that you're being told that it's worth. And so now different things will start going through your mind, like, yeah, okay, Zillow says it's worth this much, but how do I actually know that the property is not broken inside? Because if it's broken, then it's definitely not going to be worth that much. And that's really the value that you get from getting an appraisal report done, is you get an individual who is licensed to be able to validate the value of the property, not only by looking at the comps, but by validating that it's intact, it's in good condition. And if it isn't, then they're going to note that in their report, and they're going to be required to go back to make sure that those repairs have been completed. So that's the value of getting an appraisal, and that's why you want to make sure that you're protected. Now, let's talk about a few other things here, all right? Now, at what point in the transaction do you actually order an appraisal report, right? So typically what happens is this. When lender disclosures go out, the borrower needs to acknowledge them, and there's two documents in the whole stack of this, huge disclosure stack, that it's called a lender's estimate and an intent to proceed. Now, until those two documents have been acknowledged, the broker cannot order an appraisal report, because the appraisal report, again, which is important, is done by a third party. And a third party, there's only two third parties in the transaction, the residential transaction, which is credit and appraisal, typically, right? I'm not talking about all the other vendors you hire to check the physical condition of the property, right? Because there's two roads to this transaction. There's the financing side, which is what we're talking about. And then, of course, there is the real estate side. Now, I'm not talking about the fact that, you're hiring a physical inspector to go in and, check and see what's going on with the property. And they're kind of like the generalists. And if they need more specific information, you have a bunch of inspectors that might come in. That's not what I'm talking about. In lending, there's only two things that are paid outside of the transaction, which is your credit report and your appraisal report. And you ask why? Because the third party doesn't really care if you close the transaction or not. They're going to offer you a service, and they want to get paid for that service upon completion. All right? Because a lot of real estate transactions or escrows don't close. And if they didn't, and they didn't get paid for it, that would be a problem. So once you acknowledge your disclosures, we can go ahead and order your appraisal report. Typically, it takes about a week to turn an appraisal report. Now, what happens if you, in fact, get an appraisal report and it comes in lower than what you've purchased the property for, right? That could happen. And so let's just play this game for a second. Assuming that you're buying a property for $500,000, $500,000. I'm in Los Angeles. That would be very conservative. Property value comes in at $450,000. What happens? You have three choices. Choice number one, don't buy the property. You see, in your real estate, I'm gonna shift. There's a clause. There's a bunch of clauses, conditions that you get to sign off as things happen in the transaction. And one of them is your appraisal contingency. And assuming you haven't signed that off, meaning you bought the property saying, this property actually needs to appraise for me to close escrow on it, then if that appraisal comes in and it's completely short, you can either back out of the deal or renegotiate the price, right? Now, if you don't want to renegotiate the price, or the seller doesn't want to renegotiate the price, then you have one other option. Well, I guess two other options. One, you have to decide if you want to buy it. And if you do want to buy it, then you're going to have to make up the difference between the purchase price and whatever the appraised value is, because the lender is going only to lend up to, let's just say you're trying to get 80% loan to the value. And you might be trying to do that to avoid mortgage insurance, because anytime you have 20% equity in the deal, you don't have mortgage insurance. So initially, they would be looking to lend you 80% of 500, which is $400,000. But if the property value comes in at 450, they're only going to give you 80% of 450. So you'd have to make up the difference. All right. So those would be the ramifications of, do you want to buy a property that doesn't appraise? Now, what happens if the opposite happens and the property appraises for 550? Nothing changes. The lender would still base the loan on the acquisition or the purchase price. All right. So those are, or would be considered, the moving pieces. Now, a couple small things to know. Before you order an appraisal, you should actually make sure that the property has smoke alarms in the hallways, that the water heater, assuming it's not tankless, it's double strapped, and there's carbon monoxide detectors on each floor. And the reason I say that is because not to be technical, but the report is called a 1004, and a 1004 report is a typical residential appraisal report. And if you don't have those things in place, then there's a trip fee for the appraiser to come back. You can't send them pictures that you actually had these things corrected. And there's a fee for that. It's like $150 or $200. All right. So hopefully that helps you put a little bit of a perspective as to why we need this appraisal report, who goes out for this appraisal report. I will tell you this. Lenders don't communicate directly with the appraisers. All the orders go through something called an AMC. Right? And it's kind of like a hub that hires these appraisers and then they go out. And so the reason I say that is because if there's any corrections, which there's always corrections to the appraisal report, they go through and are communicated through the AMC. Also, if you disagree with the value and you're like, no, this property is worth more and it will get appraised for less, you could do a rebuttal, but let me just throw this into the universe. 90+% of the time, more like 95+% of the time, the rebuttals, they never really quite come back in your favor from my experience. And so that's the story of appraisals. If you have any questions about them, give me a call, 818-697-8220. If you need help with your loan or getting pre-approved, whatever the case may be, happy to help you out, all right? If you've enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up. And the reason being is that it will help other people like yourself looking for this type of information on the web find it. And lastly, if you enjoyed this video and you want to watch more videos like this in the future, then I would highly appreciate it if you subscribe to my YouTube channel. Support the channel. I appreciate that. Thank you for watching this. Thank you for being here. And if you have any questions, just drop them in the comments below. I'll be happy to answer them. Otherwise, I look forward to seeing you again on my next video. Thank you for watching. Take care.